So that's the answer to the universe, life, and everything. Thank you. Goodbye. End recording. So the self, let's say, the seeming individual entity, it feels like it's in time and feels like it's an agent and it has to get everything right or it will suffer. That it values continuity. It values control. It values certainty. Those are kind of its what it put, you know, put the tat on. And we think because of the momentum of this and that it's confirmed by other people all day long and by our own thoughts, we think that those are important. We think that we want continuity, predictability, solidity, assurance, but we don't realize the price we pay for that. Because when we put our stake on assurance, then we automatically set up a set of conditions where we're going to feel unsure. When we believe in control, when we believe I'm in control, we automatically set in motion the chain of events that are going to result in us feeling absolutely out of control. They're causally related. They're the same thing in consciousness. This is dependent origination in consciousness, seeing how it functions. The farther you push, the farther you're going to be pulled. The more you hide, the more you're going to seek. It's just how consciousness works. And it's a reflection of reality. Dependent origination of reality is pristine, perfect. It's not flawed. But the way consciousness interprets it is suffering, is what suffering is. It's the endless seeking. It's the endless feeling of lack, the suffocating feeling of isolation. Non-duality, non-dual, meaning no subject-object experience, is the opposite of isolation. It's seeing that there could never be isolation. That feeling was based on a misperception. It's far more complete. The everythingness. That's what we want. That's what we want when we taste it, when we feel it. When it becomes a realization, then of course it's pervasive in all encompassing everything, and it's really wonderful. But we can't make that happen by wanting it to happen. That's just more seeking, right? So instead, we can open to it. We can live in the raw. We can unguard in the simple moments. The mind will make, the self will make enlightenment, realization into some big deal, into a far off thing, into an event later. And that's, you know, it's just part of how this goes. First, we compartmentalize our life. The time on the mat is our time to investigate our true nature, and retreats are a concentrated way to do it. But the rest of my life, I kind of go lax and whatever. I just live in my internal world, partially or not all the time. But realization isn't that. Realization is here all the time, moment to moment to moment, just beckoning you to explore it, to explore what is the nature of pure presence. Pure presence, if you think it's a concept, then just remind yourself it's the sensation of your hand on the table right now. It's the sensation of your hand on fabric. That sensation itself, without any descriptions, without any beliefs about it, without any story that I'm the one to put the hand there. It's just contact. That's pure presence. Always. It always is. You can't make that not be present, no matter how much mind activity there is. So the presence is always there. That's the beauty of this. So realization comes in the mundane moments, I think. I think it's very important at some point to make that transition to where I can't afford anymore to just go unconscious, like kind of purposely, kind of not purposely, like, you know, there's always a little bit of a sort of decision point in there. But to just invite realization, invite absolute truth or living truth into your life, moment to moment. Be willing to just be receptive in moments where you're normally, based on habituation, you're normally unconscious. You normally go inward, inside. It can be things like the mundane moments where we feel bored, frustrated. This isn't important, so I'm going to think about the next thing. Those are moments where we've habituated ourselves through conditioning we didn't actually choose to adopt, but we've habituated ourselves to go unconscious repeatedly throughout the day. So instead, it's like, well, what if we just become like a child? What if we become like pure innocence? Like, I don't actually know what this is, because you don't know what this is. You don't really know what that is. You think you do because you learned about it, but you can't find that in here. You can't say, well, it's made out of ceramic and it has this history and ceramic is these kinds of molecules. You can believe all that, but that's all mental. You actually don't know what that is right there without recalling a memory. What is it in actual reality? What is it in presence? So admit some of our, readmit innocence back into our experience from childhood. I hear this frequently with people after they've had awakenings, that they say, I would totally remember this when I was a kid. I remember this, but somehow I learned to like ignore it. And it's amazing that it never left. It's always been here. And it's true that the marvel of just being in the world, being in the physicality, the marvel of the senses is not lost. It's just that it's in the senses, not in the complexity of being a human. The world of being, having priorities, more important, less important. I like it, I don't like it. What's going to make me feel more secure? What's going to make me feel better? What's going to make me feel worse? I'm the one managing all that. Like that is la la land, It's fine that it happens. It's all just movements in consciousness. But the world of vivid presence is awaiting you all the time. It's just right there. And in that, there is no self. In that, there's no other. There's no subject and object. And that's, in a sense, terrifying to the sense of self. It's terrifying to it because you realize there's no room for me there. But, it's because it's an infinitude. It's the opposite of what it seems like. It seems like there's no room for me, so I'm going to lose something. But instead, there's no room for me, so everything is gained. The entirety of the universe is gained. This is what Dogen was talked about when he talked about maximum exertion. When I take a footstep, the entire universe comes into being, creating that footstep, and then disappears completely. And then the next footstep. That's a miracle. But we have to forget a lot to start to really wake back up to that. And forget isn't an activity. It's an act of surrender, again, to the present moment. Without really surrendering to the present, it doesn't matter what teachings you know, and it doesn't matter how passionate you are even about awakening. Really, in the end, for deep stage realization, you have to really be willing to surrender to presence. I don't think there's another way. Maybe just, I don't know, grace hits you over the head or whatever, but it has to be here. It has to be here, or it's somewhere in the mind. It's because there is only here. The mind is in the business of past and future. Reality is never in the past and it's never in the future. You can't find presence in the past or future. If you experience a sensation in the body right now, the sensation of touch, or a sensation in the midline, somewhere in the chakras, a physical sensation in the chest, in the neck. Maybe you've called it fear. Maybe you've called it dread or sadness or despair, or maybe it's a bubbling joy or peace or whatever. But the sensation itself, that sensation isn't in time. It didn't come from somewhere and it's not going anywhere. To recall it, that's consciousness, right? To recall a previous moment, that's consciousness. That's the movement of the reflective nature of mind, which is fine. But be aware, that's consciousness. There's also sensation. And there's also consciousness. Thought. Thought is consciousness. Any thought, any sense of I is consciousness. It's what our mind, it's what the brain does. It tries to reflect and rearrange old experiences and create a sense of self in the world and all that. It's fine. Just see it for what it is. It's consciousness. And then the sense world. The physical sense world is right here, only right here. It morphs, it changes, it fluctuates, it appears in one part of the body and appears in another part of the body, and then it appears as a sound in the room. It appears as the ambient sounds in the room. That's presence. You don't have to label it. It doesn't matter. It just is. But it's not in the past. Right? You can never, ever, ever, ever find presence in the past or in the future, of course. That's the beauty of it. So it's teaching you about present. It's teaching you about now. It's teaching you about why you don't even have to say now, because there's nothing to compare now to. There isn't a past and future. We create a past and a future so the self can feel like it's in time. And we think that's a good idea. But we don't realize the cost of that, the pain that causes. To separate self into an infinite number of moments takes what's vividly alive and interconnected with all of reality and tries to pair it up into little pieces. That can't happen, but through the reflections of the mind, we can think it's happening. But that has a feel to it, and that feel is isolation. It's discomfort. It's not peace. So to reclaim what is our birthright, we just have to be surrendered. You know, in Zen, in a lot, I'm sure in a lot of places, actually probably most of Buddhism, they do it, and probably other Hinduism and stuff. But the idea of prostration, it's like bowing, but it's more than bowing. You get on your knees, put your head to the floor, put your hands on the floor, turn your palms up and lift them off the ground, meaning it's about as surrendered as you can get. And there's prostrations we do, like, you know, in front of the altar, in front of the statue of Buddha or whatever. But it's not a worship thing. It's called horizontalizing the mast of the ego. It's saying, I don't know. How can I know? How can I know about this? I can't know about this. I can be it. It can be as it is, clearly, pristinely, alive, vivid, sublime, but I can't know what it is. The moment I know what it is, I know 1,000 things it's not. And that's not knowing. That's trying to divide up reality, divide something that's indivisible. So yeah, prostration is a physical act that is symbolic of this surrender to presence, surrender to the moment, surrender to the feeling of the hand moving across the dog's fur. Surrender to the moment when I'm walking and there's someone else in front of me and there's a little twinge of concern, like, oh my gosh, do I have to talk to them? That right there, that physical experience, that's presence. We overlook those things because we go internal into our mind. Oh my gosh, well, what am I going to talk about? And do I like them or I don't like them, or maybe I should go the other way or whatever, right? That's the mental chatter, but there's a physical experience to that for sure, right? We're mammals, so we have physical responses to other mammals, and especially other humans. We're going to experience something. Don't abandon yourself into thought. Feel it. Feel that moment. Feel the sensation, even if it's fear, even if it's, you know, social anxiety is extremely common. It's probably maybe the most common, you know, form of neuroses, whatever. It's very common. So that's your entry point in that moment. It's beautiful. It's feeling alive, deep, profound. You can't ignore it, right? It's not something you can physically ignore. So instead, we have to create a world that doesn't exist. That's the only way out of it. And that's called me and my problems. And then we think, oh, I wish I didn't have social anxiety. But the self that thinks that wish it didn't have social anxiety actually uses the social anxiety to maintain itself. That's its world. So don't believe those interpretations. They're often like 180 degrees off. The beliefs about what I'm in control of, what I'm not in control of. Just better to see it as consciousness. Just the chattering of mind, consciousness, movement of thought. It's fine. It's feel it, feel the texture of thought, and then you don't have to evaluate thoughts. It's fine. Another way, of course, is self-inquiry. If there's a thought and it says, "Oh man, I have such bad social anxiety. I'm whatever. I'm a weird person. I don't know. Whatever the self-referential thought is." You can inquire. Okay, well, the thought says I am XYZ, but to whom does that thought refer? Can I find the one that thought refers to right now in experience? and you'll find nothing but consciousness. Again, as we went over before, another thought could come and say, well, no, I know who I am. I am so-and-so, and I have this age, and I have this gender. And then you go, oh, another thought. Well, to whom does that thought refer? I should be able to find it right now in consciousness, in this world where I feel like I'm existing in the moment. Where is it? Looking, looking, looking. You're already in presence. That's the presence of consciousness. Practice that enough, and you'll start to recognize, like, you can hold that unbound consciousness pretty easily. You can actually meditate with it. You can meditate as unbound consciousness or pure consciousness. And that really calms those polarities, that sense of a recoiling self inward, or the seeking that never stops, right? No matter what it's seeking for. It can even seek for itself. But the sense of seeking, the sense of lack, all that calms down when we are able to inquire back into just the nature of pure consciousness. And when we can relax in that enough, all of a sudden the sense world, the sense presence starts to just show itself, starts to shine, radiate its own reality. Yeah, the thing about self, the thing that's interesting about and talking about no self, it's not something I talk this directly about often, because I know it's triggering at some level, or certainly can be. But that's a mistake. The feeling, the belief of what is lost, if like self is lost, it seems like such a big deal to the seeming self. But if we break that down, it's actually not like that at all. The self values time. It values having a past and a future. It has to imagine itself in a timeline, because in this moment you won't find it. The only way you find self is to recall it. Right? To recall, oh, I remember, I'm this kind of person, but you're actually imagining that. You have to be, right? Because in this moment you won't find that. So we have to constantly go up into the mind and create a sense of self. And I'm saying it as if we're doing that. There's no one actually doing this either, but it's a way of talking. So it values time. It feels like to lose time is terrible, right? I'm going to lose my history and my future. But actually, the experience of eternity is wonderful. The experience of eternity is freedom. There's just nothing to worry about at all. There's just no concern, right? Because you see that past and future are only mental constructs. That's it. That's all they ever were. And the eternity has always been here. You didn't lose anything. You just stopped focusing all your attention on a very narrow view that seemed like a big view, that seemed like a whole life, and you're missing what life actually is. So to lose time is not a big deal at all. And you still have the ability to construct time for practical purposes, but the physical experience of timelessness is wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. And then even more so, the self feels like it's operating in a subject-object conformation in space. Like, I'm here, you're over there. You're definitely separate from me. I'm definitely back in here, and I'm navigating, and you're navigating, and we're coming to agreement, or we're disagreeing, or whatever. And then you leave, and something else comes into my space. That feeling of space, though, that intuitive sense that I definitely am something apart from all that stuff out there. There's something even more intuitive. But yeah, it could feel like you're losing something to not have this self in space. But then what the mind does, what the self does, is imagines space with nothing in it. But that's not how it is at all. It's more like collapsing into oneness. So it's unity. It's a sense of unity. But it's so intimate and complete, you don't call it unity. You don't need to call it unity. It's not a thing. So when the self apart is lost, which it was never there, it's definitely not a bad thing. It's not a bad experience. It's a wonderful experience. So again, because the self is built out of fear, actually, the distancing movement of going into mind is fundamentally a fear of life. It's a holding back a little bit, going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm in this physical body that is subject to age, defilements, pain, loss, illness, right? And we kind of learn to go back internal a little bit. And at first, it's just self-awareness. It feels fine, right? It's not a big deal. It's almost a novelty for a child. But what happens that we don't realize is our identity starts to build itself around that. We start to construct an identity in there. And then by the time we sort of feel it, which not everybody even does, but by the time we start to recognize this is really uncomfortable, this isn't right, something's not right here, that's suffering. But by the time we recognize that, what we don't realize is that all the ways I know of myself are actually sort of constructed out of fear. They're sort of constructed out of resistance. So anything that threatens it is just adding to the resistance and fear. Because it's built out of fear, anything that threatens its paradigm of separation is going to make it feel even more threatened. It's going to make it unsteady, uncomfortable. So this is largely why we face a lot of emotional challenges as we wake up, or as we're woken up. Something comes upon us and pulls that sense of self out or threatens it in a very profound way. Then we start to, the next stop is the emotion body. The next stop is the world we've been avoiding the whole time. And we just basically have to relearn how to navigate emotions. We have to relearn how to feel physically the emotion and not get lost in the interpretation of the emotion. And that's just how it goes. That's lawful. It's not really avoidable that I know of. I don't know why you'd want to avoid it anyway. So it's kind of like the next stop is the physical sensation of being a being in the world. And at first, that's kind of terrifying because it feels like, I'm out of control. I can't decide when I feel sad or angry or happy or miserable or whatever. It feels like kind of a loss of control. But again, that sense of control in the way that it's perceived by the separate seeming self is not accurate. It's a control that's misinterpreting how everything spontaneously arises. Everything is a wonderful spontaneous arisement. But when we take a picture of it and then we think we're going to control that picture after the fact, then all we do is set ourselves up for the feeling of being out of control. So the last thing we ever want to feel is helpless. Helplessness is that emotion, that sense that people always bump into sooner or later with this process that is just terrifying. But the weird thing is that you don't make the connection that all those times I thought I was in control, I was just setting this up. I was setting the audience up for the final act of terror. And I'm the audience, and I played a joke on myself, right? So again, the control and loss of control are completely intertwined. That you can't take them apart. But when that paradigm is dissolved, let's say, the experience isn't one of not having control. It's not like that. It's just that the narrowness of an agent is just nowhere to be found. The narrowness of the one that had to be in control all the time, that was bound by a need to be in control, doesn't exist. So instead, it feels like it's completely indescribable, but I will say it's something like the whole universe making a choice at once as everything. That's way better than feeling like I'm in control and then feeling like I'm out of control and feeling like I'm in control. So you don't lose anything except for a delusion. The only thing that goes away are illusions. That's it. And that's good news, right? So you gain so much, but that which you gain is very hard to talk about. It's very hard to put into words. And a lot of people, I think, who have realized that are careful not to make it into too much of a carrot. Because if you make it into too much of a goodie for someone to get in the spiritual process, then it can quite amplify the seeking. You can easily make that into a mental object and chase it in the same way you're chasing validation and security and all of the other things. So a lot of people are very careful not to make it something later on, not to turn it into the ultimate goodie or the ultimate goal. But it is. I can't lie and say it's not a wonderful and very peaceful, deeply peaceful reality. So just know it's not at the end of a series of acts for you. It's not later. It's already here. And you really just have to learn to open to it more and more and more, to surrender to the moment again and again and again. And it's perfectly possible. I've seen many people do it more and more all the time. So trust life, trust the senses. They don't lie. They just show you what presence is over and over and over. I think John Tan said something like, even swallowing saliva is a miracle. He might not have used the word miracle, but he was making the point of maximum exertion. It's even the swallowing of saliva is a is a revolutionary act. A smile, the movement of the muscles in the face. Like, it's fascinating. It's amazing. It's profound. It's incredibly intimate. But it's so intimate that there's no one it's intimate for even. It goes beyond any subject-object construct. And again, don't take it to mean practice isn't important, meditation, all that stuff. Of course, it's valuable. But at some point, you really have to take it off the mat too. And when you do that, or when you involve yourself in practice off the mat, let's say, it's important to do it without adding self-violence, without judging yourself. Oh my God, I wasn't present again. That's not what I'm talking about. Those are just thoughts, right? It's do it with gentleness. Do it with, again, openness, receptivity, bit of relaxation, trust. You can ask, that can be a koan, that can be an inquiry point. If I'm sitting and I'm hearing sounds, the dryer spinning, the computer humming, the ear ring that's always there, I can ask, can I trust this a little bit more? Can I surrender to this a little bit more? I can even ask, what is this? Again, not expecting an answer, not expecting a word answer of some concept. What is this? The answer is deepening of this. That's it. I can also ask, where is this? Meaning, is it over there across the room? The sound, attention in the sound. Is it across the room? I have to imagine a room for that, don't I? Or is it here in the body? I have to imagine a body. So do I actually know where it is? No. But it's definitely here. Definitely the case. It's definitely a radiant. It may be, as I described a couple days ago, made up of an impossible number of radiant points that aren't even points. They're so non-spacious. But it doesn't have to be like that, But can I learn from this sound cloud, this ambient sound right now? Can I learn its language? Its language is shh, click, 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 whatever. That's it. That's the language. I can learn how it's not in time because it's never in the past. I can learn how it's never completely solid because the moment I think about it to make it solid, it's already something different or gone. So it's fluxing, coming into being, disappearing out of being simultaneously. Now, don't take my descriptions for it. Investigate. Can it show me? Can this sound right now show me? There's no boundary between sound and sensation in the body. So inquiry into the sense world is actually really easy. It's very accessible. Just don't put constraints on yourself as far as what results you should get. Don't worry about that. You don't need results. The results are already there. Just be willing to ask, be willing to be receptive, to be willing to give our will a little bit over to the sounds themselves, to the sensations, and even to the visual field, the colors and shapes, movement. When you're painting, watch the paint itself. You might paint for 15 minutes and for 2 seconds you experience that. But that 2 seconds is far more real than any of the mental activity for the other 15 minutes. So be open to it, invite it. You're sitting on the toilet, the sensation of sitting on the toilet, of whatever the body's feeling, the sounds, the ambient sounds. Even if for one moment, 1 second that comes through as, whoa, that was something different, or no location, not in time. That's it. That's the teaching. That's the lesson. The lesson is direct. It shows you, the lesson is that it's already here. It shows you how it's already here. And we can learn to attune to that. And we attune again by not trying to control, letting the environment show us what it is, teach us. Also, if this is sort of new to you, it can be very helpful to just sit back for a minute and ask yourself, when do I feel the most present? In what environment do I feel the clearest? And for many people, it's in nature, like walking in the forest is common, but it's not everyone. Some people, it's listening to music. Some people, it's doing some kind of craft with your hands. It can be making art, visual art. So if you ask yourself and it suddenly hits you like, oh yeah, I've had people say that this to me, and they go, you know, it's so funny because in a sense, without using these words, they'll say, I'm so present when I'm doing that, I don't even realize it. But reflecting, I can tell, yeah, that's why I do it, because it's so relaxing. Oh, exercise is another one. Not everybody, like definitely not me, but there are people who exercise is their meditation. You know, especially exercise where it's like riding a bike, running long distances, something where you do it for a long time until the sense of self just calms and dissolves, and you really are in the physical. The sense world becomes far more present, more non-dual. So it could be an exercise thing for you, but just open yourself to that. And then in those moments you can learn, oh, this is what that is. This is what that is. Then you can learn to open yourself in that same way in environments where it's a little less easy, maybe. And over time, you can even do it in environments that it's very challenging. And for most people, the most challenging environments are around other people for various reasons I won't go into because we don't have a long time, and a lot of people already know anyway. But yeah, being around people, especially if it's emotionally charged, there's emotional connections, or a difficult person or a difficult situation. Those are about as hard as it gets, really. It's in my experience and the experience of most people I interact with. That's about as challenging as it gets to remain in a serene, non-dual flow, to experience zero distance, even experience emptiness. It can happen for sure. It does happen, but it's, you know, our nervous systems are they learn patterns, and then they're very good at putting a little bit of energy all the time into keeping that same pattern going. That's kind of how neurons are wired, right? So we don't realize we're putting a little bit of effort into selfing all the time. And sometimes we're putting a lot of effort into selfing. But we can retrain the nervous system for sure, easily. I don't know, easily is like not really the right word, because it can take time. But the singular acts of surrender, the singular acts of allowing the sense world to just come forth, are not hard. They're very simple. Anyone here can do it easily. Just open more to it, a little bit more here and there. Find those moments in life where it's like, wow. I mean, I probably one of the most enjoyable or surprising things about this whole deal for me really was when I realized, like, sitting in a deep state of meditative bliss, for instance, which doesn't happen every time you meditate. Of course, there's times when it's hard. There's times when it's very peaceful and relaxed. But in that most incredible deep state of relaxed meditation, samadhi, whatever it is, that's literally available in washing your hands, locking the door. That's there, actually. It's not just available, it's actually there, shining brightly, radiant. That was one of the most amazing things. It's like you live it's just like a gold mine. Experience is a gold mine. You know, if as long as you don't make distinctions and preferences about it, what's better, what's worse. Or if those distinctions arise, because they do, and they're often unconscious until they become conscious, recognize them for what they are. They're just evaluations. They're just fluctuations in consciousness. and see that every time you have one fluctuation, you're going to have the opposite in consciousness. Meaning, the moment I feel in control, I'm going to feel out of control. The moment I feel certain, I'm going to feel doubt later at some point. They just come with each other. And then you start to realize, like, oh, I'm kind of both at the same time. Certainty, doubt, certainty, doubt, certainty, doubt. And you stop putting your finger on the scale on this side to keep the whole thing swinging. Certainty, doubt, certainty, doubt. You know, fear, control, fear, control, fear, control. And it just comes to more of an equilibrium in consciousness. And that's the work of relaxing the tendency to always make distinctions, always make judgments, always pick and choose. Choice is one of the ultimate distortions in the way our mind thinks about it. Because in our mind, we think of choice, or often think of choice as, I'm here and I can imagine 10,000 things that could happen. Wow, I feel so free. And I can pick each one of those 10,000 things, not realizing the whole time we're doing that, we're using that internal world to just escape from what's actually physically happening right now. I don't have a way to soften the blow on that. It's just how it is. It really is. But you have to see through it and realize, like, choosing to go internal and just, think, use thought porn, to just distract yourself from what's physically happening has a huge price to pay, but we don't often see it in that moment. When we first learn as a child to, like, go into the imagination world, to the imagination land, it's kind of fun and magical, right? And all that sort of thing. But when it becomes your default, when you can't get out of it anymore, it's like not so much fun, right? It's an addiction. Same as anyone who's had addiction issues. When you first drink that drink, when you first get high, when you first feel that experience, it's like, wow, this is great. Like, oh my gosh, I can just go do this anytime and I'll feel better than I did ever. It's awesome. And all of a sudden you find yourself in this place where it's not fun anymore. It's fucking terrifying because you can't stop it. You can't get out of it. That's how self is. Paul Hederman says the ultimate addiction is the addiction to self, and I would totally agree. It's the root of all addictions. But it's so sneaky, right? Because you think you're in control, similar to any other addiction. You think you're in control. The illusion of being in control is what drives that addiction to the point where the body, mind literally can't even get away from it anymore. And something else needs to step in, grace, something. That's how it is with our thought system. And by the time we're a young adult, we're spending almost all our time in it, for the average person, I would say. So yeah, just recognize those little lies we tell ourselves, or of control, etc. It's not that you're out of control. It's not that there is no control so much. It's just that the way control is being imagined is an illusion, and it's creating a sense of a self that's out of control that you're going to bump into later on. You're not going to like it. So just see that. Instead, it's like, okay, well, gosh, if I don't concern myself all day long with controlling my experience, controlling my emotions, controlling what I eat, controlling what other people think of me, all of that. If I don't occupy my attention with that all day long, what the hell am I going to do? Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what you're going to do is start to allow the sense world back in. Start to allow true life to just shine and to fill the senses. They're already there, but to fill your experience and to become the acceptor of that, the receiver of everything, the receiver of life. And then the receiver disappears into life. But that's, again, not something you can make happen, and imagining it doesn't help. You just enjoy the act. Just enjoy the moment of surrender again and again and again. And reality will narrow down more and more into this moment. More presence, more joy, peace. Also more emotion sometimes, more intensity at times, more sense of a rawness with living. But that's totally fine. It's okay. When the tendency slows down enough and stops to keep saying no, 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 then all of a sudden we realize everything we ever said no to was perfectly okay. It was the saying no that made us uncomfortable. Everything, it's all perfect. Sadness, grief, gain, loss, confusion, it's perfectly fine, perfectly okay, as what it is, on its own accord, in its own way. It's the no part, the wanting to distance ourselves from what is impossible to distance yourself from, is what causes all the pain, discomfort. So yeah, when it comes to no self, don't worry about it. Don't try to believe there's no self or decide whether you think there is or not. That's all going to be thought. Just trust that there may be something a little bit bigger than you, a little bit more vast, more intimate than you can even imagine, because it is beyond what you can imagine. It's the imagining that limits our perception. Just open to that possibility that maybe I can trust life. Maybe I don't have to freaking control everything. Maybe I don't have to control what everyone thinks of me all the time. Maybe I don't have to control how my moods are constantly or whatever I think I'm doing. What if I just free up all that energy to instead pay attention? Be the receiver. Don't be the actor. Don't be the one trying to act upon life and yourself and others and your emotions. Be the receiver. Be receptive, and then be receptivity itself. And then just sounds. That's it. Sounds filling up the entire universe. Sensations. Destroying you moment by moment by moment. Destroying any sense of escape, of wanting to escape, of control, of loss of control. There's just nothing. They're little fluctuations in consciousness. But vivid aliveness, that's what we've always wanted. We've always been chasing it. We just didn't know we just forgot what it was. We separated ourselves from it seemingly, and then we forgot what it was. So regain your birthright through practice and surrender, but mostly surrender. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks for coming. David, you're new. Thanks for coming. We lost somebody. I was a little worried. This topic can kind of freak people out a little bit, but whatever. So we'll see you guys all for a question and answer at 1500, 3 hours. Enjoy your midday. See you guys.